Hello, and welcome to a very special video edition of a podcast that I'm doing here at Neil's Substack. For all the subscribers out there, I am joined by a very special guest. Rich Grisham of Out of the Park is joining me, and I've known Rich for a long time. He and I have collaborated together on a number of projects that date back to 538. RIP, the late lamented 538 now, and also my Substack. We have a little tradition every year of looking at Out of the Park, predicting the upcoming season. So this is a guest that I have worked with a lot and just always enjoy talking to. And so welcome to a special pop-up podcast on the Substack, Rich.
Well, thank you. Like you said, Neil, we've done so much fun stuff together over the years. It is always a big thrill to get together and talk with you.
Well, thanks again for taking the time because I know that you were mentioning this. We are talking a little bit before we hit record that the public beta of Out of the Park just dropped like a few hours ago, right?
Yep. Yep. So we're all, the reason you have a public beta is because no matter how much preparation and testing you do, once real people, at scale get their hands on something, they always do things that you either didn't expect or didn't plan for, or all of the above. So yeah, we are now literally like, adjusting the dials and pulling the levers and doing all the things that we can do for the next few days to really what the public beta does, it accomplishes two things. Number one, it lets your fans get a hold of the game early because they want to play baseball. They want to see what their teams look like this year. They want to see what their rotation looks like, how their bullpen looks. And
Well, and
then
I
the
should
other,
take a step back. Can you
yeah,
explain a little bit for the listeners that don't know what exactly is Out of the Park? We kind of jumped into it, and I think
sure.
I sort of glossed over it, but Out of the
No,
Park is a game. Can you sort of explain what people can expect from the game?
yeah, sure. So Out of the Park Baseball is a PC strategy game. So you play it on your computer. It does have a mobile companion app that comes out, in a few weeks after its release. But it's a PC strategy game. So the best way to think about it if you're of a certain age, is that it is a modern day version of like a micro league baseball or a stratomatic, that kind of a thing, right? It's all about strategy, building your lineups, building your rotations, setting your roles for your players. All of those kind of things is what it's about. It's not about how quickly you can press a button to swing or how you can, arc your controller to throw. It's about how good are you at building a baseball team. And it is so many different things to so many people. But really, at its core, it's just about, can you build a franchise? And it's not just about running a single major league team. Like if I wanted to pick up the New York Mets in 2025 and run them, I don't just run the Mets Major League Club. I also have the AAA, the AA, the Single A, the Rookie League, the entire franchise. So, you draft players, you trade for players, you sign free agents, you scout, you set up your finances. Like Out of the Park Baseball is about running an entire organization, and it's licensed by Major League Baseball and the MLB Players Association. So we have the real teams and the real players, and we also have several international licenses as well. So you can really just completely immerse yourself in the world of running a baseball team. And you can do it not only for the current year, for the upcoming 2025 season, but you could literally go back in time through the entire history of baseball and manage any team from any time from like the late 1800s through now. And even just saying that, when I tell you we're just scratching the surface, we're just scratching the surface. But at its core, hopefully that's a pretty good description of what out of the park baseball is.
Yeah, and definitely this is a game that I think you and I got connected because I have been an avid player for a long time, really going back to like the mid 2000s, I think was when I started. And th this is probably a good segue to kind of get into Well, some of the broader questions that I wanted to touch on in our conversation was, so you're talking about the public beta, that's for Out of the Park 26,
Yep.
which is the 26 representative of like this is the 26th edition of it, or is that
Mhm.
not line up? Or so it is the 26th.
It is, and this is something that's been going on for a long time. The naming convention. It's not trying to be like a year ahead. It's not Out of the Park 2026. It's literally Out of the Park 26, meaning the 26th edition of the game. Last year we celebrated our 25th anniversary. This year is our 26th version. So yeah, the 26 refers to the number of it. At some point in the next 50 years, we may be able to figure out a way to get, to get the naming convention to line up with a year, because we don't want people to try to think that we're trying to be sneaky and be a year ahead. But it is what it is. It's a 26 version, and that's what we're going with right now.
Well, Madden also has that issue, although I think theirs was more like deliberate. I don't know if that started during like the Sega Genesis era or something, but I just know that they're always a year ahead. And then
Right.
they've tried a few times to do like a reset, like in 2013, I think it was, they did Madden 25, which is the
Right.
25th anniversary, which then
Yep.
became incredibly confusing for them last year because there was an actual 2025. But
Right.
the 26 for you guys represents the 26th version of the game. So I guess it must have come out in the year 2000, the very first one. Can you talk a little bit about the history of Out of the Park?
Mhm.
Like what inspired its creation? You talked about sort of the tradition of the tabletop baseball games and then the early computer simulation games, but what was the origin of Out of the Park specifically, and sort of the niche that it wanted to kind of step into and fill for the fans that love these games? Because there's been, people have loved this type of game for 50, 60, 70 years. Like I remember there were games with like you'd flick a little spinner and it would have, I think that was called All-Star Baseball maybe, but you would use the outcomes from that, and then Stratomatic, of course, and all these other ones. So, Out of the Park, how did it get started, and what were they sort of looking to as inspiration?
Yeah. So Out of the Park Baseball is the brainchild of a fellow named Marcus Heinzen. Marcus is German, born and raised in Germany, and in the late '90s he fell in love with baseball, and he took a trip to the United States and sort of discovered baseball, and then brought some bats and balls and gloves with him home, and he just baseball, right, Neil? Like, just once it grabs you, it doesn't let go. And so in the late '90s, he was a computer programmer and still is. I mean, I'm not he's alive and well, and he's not like in the past tense. And as a computer programmer, he was looking for a good baseball game to play on the PC, and he didn't find one that sort of matched what he was looking for. And as a programmer, those the what's something that you can do? Well, if you got a software problem, you can create a software solution, and that's what he did. He wrote the game, and for a couple 2 or 3 years sort of released a version, basically physically, to a few hundred of his closest friends over the course of a few years, and slowly but surely over time built up a game, built a reputation, started you know reaching larger groups of people. For many years it was just him, and then he partnered with his friend Andreas. um, and then probably about 10 years in, they really sort of had something really good going in terms of the software as well as a company. And then around the middle 2000s is when the license with Major League Baseball became a thing, and that really took Out of the Park from being sort of a tiny little niche product that a few thousand baseball crazies like myself loved, to something different. Because once you become partners with Major League Baseball, it brings you into a different area. So they got the license, about 10, 15 years ago. And then soon after they got the MLBPA license. And then that really brought them into a different area. And that was right when I joined the company, was back then. So, it's been a very, very, very long, 26 years evolution of the game, which has come out every year since then. And it is just slowly built upon itself, right? Like it used to just be the upcoming season, and then it was some historical years, and then it's the entire history of baseball. And then it went from just being an online, excuse me, just an offline sort of single player game to a game that you could have play against your friends in online leagues. And then in 2018 or 2019, I think it was 2018, late 2018, we added a mode for online competitive baseball, which again took us to a whole nother new level. So it's an incredible story. Marcus's story has been told a few times. He's all over our YouTube, and there have been articles written about him. But it's a really incredible story of how one guy, through sheer will and love of baseball, over the course of a couple of decades, crafted what is recognized by everybody in and around the game as by far the best simulation of baseball that you can get on the market. And that's the reason that I joined the company, 9 or 10 years ago, was because, one thing I learned in my career is that if you want to be really successful, one great way to do it is to have a great product. It sounds really silly when you say it out loud, really obvious, but Out of the Park Baseball has been a great product for a long time, and that's why I wanted to work with them, and that's why they've achieved the success that we have, and that's why we're lucky enough to right now be launching the next version of the game as I sit here and I talk to you.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've really been impressed with, because like I said, I think I probably started playing it around, like it was definitely before the Major League license, and you had to, I forget how they used to do it, whether it was like fictional players, but people would like crowdsource rosters that you could import, or if it had the names, but they were like slightly changed or something. But I definitely remember playing the game, and it was the presentation was not what it is now, I'll
No,
say, at
no,
that time. But you could
yeah,
see, the for especially for somebody that I grew up on the tabletop versions of these things and would play. Every like little baseball game that I could get my hands on as a kid, that you could see the bones of what it would eventually become even then. But the strides that it's made to what it is now are really, really incredible, including things not just the interface and the menus and everything, which is there's so many quality of life improvements there. But I love like watching the actual renderings of the field in 3D now, which I don't remember what version that came in. It was in maybe the last like 10
yeah,
years or something.
yeah. More than five,
But
less than 10. Yeah,
yeah, but even that has been like such a change where it wasn't unplayable. We didn't know what we were missing before
right,
that. But
exactly.
when you actually have that and you can actually see the players, kind of moving around on the field, tracking down fly balls and so on and so forth, it adds that element that's like you as a fan watching. I can't tell you how many times I've bought cheap seats up at, way behind home plate at
Oh
Citi
yeah,
Field, sitting back there and just, hanging out at the ballpark, but watching from that bird's eye view. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I actually get to do this with my own team that I've built in the
right.
game, which I think is a really cool development. But is that something where, I know that well, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. It seems like
Mhm.
there's a divide between games like Madden, like MLB The Show, these kind of like you talked about the button presses, the controller, whatever you want to call it, where like you are the player and you're making decisions as though you're the player, and then this other set of management simulations, for lack of a better term, which Out of the Park is one of them, where you're not really the player, you're the GM, you're the coach, you're in charge of the action, but you don't control the players. But it does seem like, is everything kind of just converging toward like one thing in some ways, because you have franchise modes in those other games that try to mimic, and they certainly are not as in depth as like an Out of the Park, but then also with the 3D graphics and the renderings of the players on the field, something like Out of the Park is starting to resemble more one of the fast twitch type of games, for lack of a better term. So is there going to be a day in which they just sort of like converge with each other and you can kind of do both in the same one, or is there always going to be a separate lane because it's just two different types of players and fans that each appeals to?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm reticent to predict too far in the future because the video game business is so volatile and um, so embedded in technology, and technology just moves at such a pace that is very challenging to make predictions um, with any sense of accuracy. However, even with all of that said, one of the things that I've learned in this business that I've been in now for, about 10 years is that there are many different types of players. And by that, I mean, not just in the world of baseball, not just in the world of sports video games, but in the world of all video games. I'll sort of go macro and come back in. 10 years ago, the notion of watching somebody play video games on your computer or your phone instead of playing video games didn't even exist, right? Like the only time you were watching video games, the time you were watching somebody play video games 10, 15 years ago was when you were just, you happened to be unlucky and you walked in the room after somebody fired up and you're just waiting your turn, to get on there, right? And now people watching people play video games live on Twitch or on YouTube is has exploded in popularity and is a thing, right? So you've got players who want to not only not, play Twitch experiences, but they don't even necessarily want to even play. They just want to see what other people are doing and how they're doing it. And then you've got all the way on the other side, you've got fans who want to literally control every pitch, control every swing, and by that I mean physically control. They want to, they want to call the pitch, they want to pull the lever, they want to press the buttons, the timing, they want to do all of that for every single inning, every at bat, every game, everything, right? And then in between, you've got this whole run of players like some who really just want to run a team, some who they want to experience throwing a pitch or swinging a bat, but they don't want to necessarily have to spend the time that it takes to learn those controls and to get good at them. And then you've got people who just want to play on their own, not be involved with anybody else. They just want to go 162 and 0 and win the World Series 20 years in a row. And then you got people who only have fun competing online against people and winning rewards and competitions. So my this is a lot of words for a pretty simple question, but there are so many different types of players who want so many different types of experiences. And one thing that I've discovered, especially in the last 5 years, is there's never been a better time to be somebody who loves to play baseball video games. Because if you're a PC player, you've got Out of the Park Baseball, which is an incredibly deep strategy game, is really tailor made for people who love the PC. On mobile, you've got games like my company makes, like MLB Nine Innings and MLB Rivals, which kind of combine action and strategy and card collecting. And then you've got MLB The Show on console, which is a next generation, beautiful player controlled experience where you're really the focus is on your ability to make that pitch or to connect with that, with that bat. And yes, there's obviously going to be a lot of crossover, but I definitely think that we're actually in a situation where the best way to serve the most fans is to give multiple experiences where there is certainly some crossover, but also some uniqueness across that. And I think Major League Baseball recognizes that because they provide tremendous support to us and the different kind of games that we make. Um, and so I think at the end of the day, there's just a lot of different ways that people want to play. A lot of different ways. There's not sort of a single way. And also, not for nothing, right? Once you get to be a certain age, you kind of lose some of your Twitch skills and
Hey,
it can
you're
be
telling me.
frustrating, right? It can be frustrating. Like I love the show and I play it all the time, but I don't play it online anymore because those kids, they
God.
just, they crush me. And that's fine. That's what they want to do. I play my March to October mode and I just love it that way. And sometimes I win and sometimes I don't. So I love where baseball video games are right now because there's almost every kind of experience for every kind of player.
That's a really great point, and something that I hadn't really connected the dots on. I've written before about how the console world of sports games has kind of, for lack of a better term, stagnated. And I always love to point back to the NFL exclusivity that killed NFL 2K, and then there was the retaliatory one with EA that killed MLB or MVP baseball, and then suddenly you just had these like we coalesce to this point where on the consoles there's almost just like one option if you want to play with the license at least for each of the sports. Madden is your NFL, NBA 2K is your basketball. There's no college for a lot of different reasons, some good and some bad. And the show is the console option for baseball. But I hadn't really thought about the fact that baseball is kind of the only sport, at least with a very well-known PC simulator that's not just something that's like super indie. And with all due respect to there's a lot of people that make text-based simulators for the
Hmm.
other sports out there, but Out of the Park is the one that's like it's got the license, it's got the
Hmm.
sort of endorsement of MLB, and you mentioned the console game or the mobile games as well. So it
Hmm.
does seem like, in a weird way, baseball, yeah, is the sport that seems to have the most options for different types of players. Why do you think that is? Is it just because baseball is like a maybe a simpler game to kind of get an engine going and simulate versus something like football where you have to have like so many moving players on the field and so many different things? Like I know Madden has had a little, they've to hear some people tell it, like shout out to Ryan Moody guy on YouTube that complains incessantly about Madden, that Madden has never gotten that right. I tend to be maybe a little more forgiving, but it certainly seems like it's a lot harder to program AI of, player behavior and blocking and things like that in football than it is in baseball. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, couple of answers. Number one, the number one amount, the top amount of credit goes to Major League Baseball because they have fostered these different experiences, right? Like it wasn't until I got into the business and started working with our license partners that I realized that, and I give Major League Baseball an extraordinary amount of credit because they don't have to do this. Every single game that Major League Baseball license means a lot of work for Major League Baseball because it has to be the appropriate game, right? It has to have the right teams and the right logos and the right stadiums and the right colors. Like it has to be authentic to Major League Baseball. And so that is, it's easy to just say that, but, Major League Baseball has done an incredible job of fostering these different experiences because they recognized a long time ago that baseball video games are an incredible marketing tool for the sport and an incredible way to introduce kids to the sport in a way that might not be as easy to reach them through standard television or bringing the kids to the game. Like one of my favorite things about going to baseball games is seeing how many kids are there, right? A lot of kids go to baseball games, but they're also eating cotton candy and getting ice cream and playing in the wiffle ball field and doing all the stuff that the clubs do a great job of providing entertainment for the kids. But the number one reason is Major League Baseball recognized that they have a lot of different types of fans with a lot of different demographics, a lot of different age ranges, and they don't all want the same thing. Now, I don't make licensed NFL or NBA games, so I can't speak to what those leagues do or do not want, but I can speak to the fact that Major League Baseball has made it clear that they want a lot of different ways for fans to play their games in the world of video games, and I think that's really, looking back 10 years, really smart of them. And so I give Major League Baseball the number one credit for that. In terms of ease or difficulty, there ain't nothing easy about making these games. And I don't say that like as a complaint or, oh, it's so hard. No, it's just a fact, right? Like if you sort of break down what it takes to render a out of the park baseball experience, you have an underlying database which has literally just data, right? The players, the names, the attributes, the teams, all of those things. Then you've got sort of the AI engine that makes it run, right? That sort of makes sure that the ratings and the algorithms produce results that make sense, both in terms of a single game and in terms of a season. based upon, the era in which it's being played. Then you have the user interface level, which is the graphical representation of all of those things to people. And sometimes it's a screen with a lineup on it. Sometimes it's a 3D stadium, and you're watching games play out. And then there's the underlying servers behind the scenes that power the experience. Like there's so much technology that goes into making one of these games work. I think that's the biggest reason you don't see dozens of these games in all of the sports, because it's not impossible, but is extraordinarily difficult to build something that can do what an out of the park baseball does, or what an MLB The Show does, or what an MLB Nine Innings or an MLB Rivals does, or for that matter, what a football manager does. Like,
Yeah.
I love Football Manager. I have met a few of the guys who make Football Manager. They made an announcement last year that they're going to break down their game and rebuild it in new technology. And when they announced that, I was like, man, that is a big job, right? And I know 1/10 of 1% of what it takes to do something like that, right? And I give them a tremendous amount of credit. And then what turned out is it was a bigger job than they expected, so they've had to delay the game and sort of basically skip a year heading into next year, right? If Football Manager, right, the most popular sports strategy game in the world times 1,000, has challenges, upgrading theirs, that should give you some level of understanding as to how complicated it is to make a game that's good, right? Anybody who knows how to write code can write code. But to make something that's actually good, that will delight players, is almost impossible. It's not impossible because at least 11 or 12 different studios have figured it out. But man, it's really, really challenging. And honestly, I think that is the reason you don't see nearly as many of them. You know, there have been a lot of things that have happened in the world of sports video games, but the level of complexity to make something good has gotten so high. That really, I think, is what, you know, if you gotta, just like if you're starting, a new project, and you're gonna have to spend $13 million over 3 years before you see your first penny of revenue, that's pretty daunting. You know what I mean? And that's sort of like that's what it would take to make something, to build up something, brand new. And I'm obviously just throwing out random numbers, but like you can't just, write a few lines of code, press a couple buttons, and copy a couple of images, and here you got a game. Like it's an extraordinary effort.
Especially
Extraordinary.
not for like a mass audience, which I
Right.
think is one of the things that is really impressive about what you guys have done is that it's like I said, when I was growing up, I think it was, there was a game called Strategic Baseball Simulator. I don't know if you remember this. It was free. That was
I
the
was a
one
micro
reason.
league baseball guy. Like I lost like 3 years of my life to micro league baseball. That was mine. That was mine.
Yeah, I remember that one too. And this one I think was like freeware back when that was a thing. And it was just a game that you had to kind of really be invested in. Like you had to know where to look, where to even find it. I don't know how I found it. This was like pre-Google. I don't even know
Right.
where I even came up with this. But then you had to know where to find all the different like roster files and various other things. And so there was like a huge barrier for fans and players to be able to even like play these things. Whereas now, I really like the fact that I think both you guys and the show do this in your own ways. Like I forget what it's called, like March to October or some
Mhm.
type of
Yep.
mode like that. But basically, in some ways, if one of the big complaints about real baseball is that there's just like, oh, there's so many games and it's just, such a commitment and all that, the advantage of simulated baseball is you can delegate as much as you want in these games. And you guys have done a great job of making that easier than ever to kind of not feel like the fear for me was always, well, if I simulate a bunch of games and I delegate a bunch of things to the computer, they're gonna like do stuff that I don't like and it's gonna mess
Right.
up my team and then I'm gonna have to just start over. So I may as well simulate every game and kind of do that. You drive
Right.
yourself crazy doing that though. And so I like these modes that have sort of recognized that, okay, there's some people that want to play every inning of every game,
Yep.
162 plus, and that's
Yep.
great. I mean, that's
Hmm.
sort of the core fan base from way back in the day.
Yep.
But there are also fans that want to be that kind of in between of, I want to feel like I'm in control of what matters and maybe delegate what doesn't matter. And that seems to be something that you guys have done a great job of. Was that like, how did you come to that mode and that general sort of recognition that you needed to have something like that for a certain set of fans? Was it like playtesting, kind of asking fans what they would like to see in a game, or did somebody have like a eureka moment where they were like, "Oh yeah, what if we just, if people are going to simulate a bunch of games anyway, but they'll do it like manually through the menus, why don't we just make a mode around that?" What was the origin of that?
Yeah, so Drive to the Pennant
Drive
is
to the Pennant.
Drive for the Pennant is the mode you're talking about, which is basically it takes the out of the park baseball experience and sort of puts you on a roller coaster. You know what I mean? So you'll basically say, all right, I want to do Drive for the Pennant. I want to start it. I want to be the Mets in 2025, right? And so what'll happen is you basically press a button and in a minute or two, you'll be like, oh, you got a big trade offer. Do you want to trade Pete Alonso for Freddie Freeman? You know what I mean? And you'll say, well, yes, I do, or no, I don't, right? And then it'll take your answer and whatever you say, it will then make that happen in the game. And then it'll quickly move forward to the next big moment. And the big moment could be, all right, it's the seventh inning of opening day, and you're down by one and you got two guys warming up and you got two outs. So now, do you want to jump into the game and sort of make the key decisions and see what happens? And then you can do that, or you can say, no, I'll move to the next one. And it'll be like, all right, it's now, April 19th and it's the eighth inning and your pitcher is throwing a no hitter. Do you want to jump in and manage it? And it'll just sort of bring you to different moments where you'll just pick whatever you want to make happen at that time. It could be a trade, it could be an in-game situation, it could be a managerial change, right? There's a lot of different things, and what that came from, and I've said this before, so I don't mind saying it again. Like it is a shameless ripoff of MLB The Show's March to October. But I mean that like in the most respectful way, because the first time I played March to October, my friend told me, "Oh, they added Rich Grisham mode to the show." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because I'm that guy who wants to play every game, but I also know that like, if I'm going to play, 82 games of NBA 2K, or if I'm going to play 162 games of the show, boy, that's a pretty significant investment of time. And I've created this whole playing video games on a treadmill that lets me walk, a couple of miles, 5 or 6 days a week. So that's
That's
sort of how we
smart, by
do
the
it.
way. I should do
Changed
that.
my life, man. Changed my life. I put I don't know if you can see it, but I got my treadmill right here, my TV right there, and my Xbox and PlayStation there. So, um, but what it came down to is we, if we take a step back, out of the park baseball is known for being incredibly in depth, right? Like you can literally control everything about the team. Your rosters, your scouting, your finances, your free agencies, trades. Single A, double A, triple A, rookie league, everything, right? Like you can spend hours before you've even started spring training, just looking at stuff and deciding how you want to run anything.
And
And you
I
can
have.
also, of course,
and
we all
and
have,
it's
right?
and it's such a yeah, it's such a time sink. You like kind of look up and you're like, wait a second.
Right.
I haven't even done it. I haven't advanced one day into
Right.
this
Exactly.
franchise.
And you can also literally press a button and simulate an entire 162 game season, in just a couple of minutes, right? And let the computer do everything. And the first time I played March to October, I was like, oh, this is really good. And it served a couple purposes. Was one of the things that we heard for a long time is that Out of the Park needed to get better at tutorials and explaining all the things that you can do in the game and showing you where they are. So we introduced some tutorials a few years ago, like in-game tutorials that people liked and were configurable. Um, but then we're like, okay, well, what's another way that we could sort of give people the greatest hits of out of the park baseball, right? Because what are the moments of fun in out of the park baseball, right? There's making a big trade, there's signing a big free agent, there's winning a big game, there's winning, clinching a playoff spot, there's winning a division series, there's all of these moments that happen over the course of a year, and we wanted to like be able to introduce certain aspects of the game, but without it sort of being just this massive, overwhelming amount of things. And what it wound up being is sort of the best of both worlds, because a lot of our fans have said, "Oh, this is fun. I like this. It's kind of like a nice appetizer for me to play before I dive into, the real nitty
The
gritty."
real game,
Right.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And the other thing that it's done is it's especially now that you can go back and play Drive for the Pennant any year in history, it is another way for people to sort of go back in time and experience their favorite teams or their most hated teams, um,
Just
in a
sabotage.
different
I'll
way.
go back and
Right.
sabotage the Yankees every year.
Exactly. That's what we do. You know what I mean? So, but really, it just comes down to it's another way to play the game, and it's a way that really just sort of it's like a Disney ride. You're on rails, you're making some key decisions, but a lot of the stuff is being taken care of for you in the background. It's not that it's better than or worse than, it's just another way to play. And we found a surprising number of people who have added that mode to how they play the game, not just like, oh, I only play Drive for the Pennant, or I only play franchise mode, or I only play perfect team. We have a lot of our players now who play all of these different modes and enjoy them, for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it does kind of curate the big moments, because that's another thing where, you know, as you get older, there's less time to really
Yes.
sink into things. Like I remember being a
Yep.
kid, you could just spend, an entire summer just doing nothing but playing video games if you wanted to, and now it's
Yes, I
like,
did. I did.
yeah. And
Can't do that anymore.
no, you can't do it anymore when you have a job and you have family and responsibilities and all that. So
Yep.
maybe that is also a sign of certain parts of the player base aging with like meeting the needs of where people are in their lives, as well as not to say that it's catering to an older audience, because I'd be curious, like, I mean, I'm sure there's also a younger audience that
Hmm.
appeals to as well, because they just have so many other options of what to do with their time that there may not be as many people who just dive into all the nitty-gritty things that we used to do.
Yeah, it's really about expanding the ways for people to have fun. That's what it comes down to, right? And fun is such an easy word to say, and the definition of fun to different people means very different things, right? But at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to make out of the park baseball as fun as it possibly can. And if you're a long time out of the park fan, you already know. You know what I mean? You know what fun is. You know what your version of fun is. You know what you're going to do in out of the park. But we want to keep giving people new reasons to pick up the new game, um, and we want to make it less intimidating for newcomers. We hear on a regular basis that out of the park is intimidating for new players. Not intimidating like
They should have tried it in the mid 2000s, by the way.
yeah, no kidding. Right. But, intimidating just because there's so much that you can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
And
endless. It's really
it
infinite.
really is. Right. Like, we haven't gotten into like you can create your own fictional universes. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to take the 50 best teams ever in the history of baseball and throw them all in the same league, like, you can not only play real seasons, current and past, but you can create your own universes and do stuff. Like, and so we just want to give people as many ways for fun as they want, and that one of the biggest differences in video games in 2025 than in 2015, and certainly before then, is that people really expect a lot of value from their games, and we want to make sure that we give them as much value as possible. People don't play at scale. People don't buy as many games and play as many games in the past as they used to, right? There's a lot more people that spend more time with fewer amounts of games, and there's a lot of people who play out of the park baseball. That's all they play. That's their game, right? um, and we're trying to make sure that not only we delight them, but we also for those people out there who have heard about out of the park baseball but have never played it or never tried it because it's just so big or there's so much they can do. We also want to make sure that there are ways that they can, within a few minutes of downloading and installing it, they can be doing something that's fun, right? Whether that's start a drive for the pennant, this year, and over the course of 2 or 3 hours go through an entire season making big decisions, or if they want to create their own team in perfect team that they can play against people, online in tournaments and in leagues and stuff at different levels, right? Whether they want to go all in and be super competitive or just, rip some packs and put some guys out there and see it. Like Perfect Team is sort of another one of those things that we created, which is it's a way that it strips away some of the stuff of the franchise mode. Like you don't have scouting and finances and trades and free agency in Perfect Team, but you do have, you open card packs and then you build your roster based upon them. So you build your lineups and your rotations, and you can have different versions of those teams, in different competitions, right? So it's not just a 25-man roster. It's like, well, I have 700 cards, and I can have my iron level tournament team and my gold level tournament team, and I can use different combinations for them. So we just want to give as many people as many different ways to play as they want to. And you mentioned, sort of when I first started 10 or 11 years ago with Out of the Park, before we had Perfect Team and before we had Drive for the Pennant and before we had some of the newer stuff, before we had our 3D stadiums and things like that, our audience definitely was a median age, somewhere in the mid 50s. And over the course of 10 years, that has dropped about 10 years to where our median
Wow.
age of our players is late 30s and early 40s. And a lot of that is because of the addition of the online competitive mode and the addition of sort of the simpler ways. Because again, it just makes it easier for people who, you might love baseball, but you're not really that in tune with the Rule 5 draft and what it means to your franchise. You know what I mean? And you want to play
You
baseball,
gotta
you
watch
want to
out for
manage
that
your
though. You
team.
gotta check how many options your players have and all
I have lost so many players to that stinking Rule 5 draft because I forgot to do something.
the.
So again, I know I'm just going on and on, but like we try our best to give as many different fans as many different ways to experience the game as possible, and we'll never be done because one of the great things about baseball, right? It might sound like it's very limiting to make a baseball game because you can't add lacrosse or rugby or ice skating, right? Like, it's just baseball. But yet, this better than anybody. Within the world of baseball is constantly changing, evolving, modifying, right? Like there's just always more that you can do to make your game as authentic as possible. And we're always looking for those things, and we're always talking to our fans every single day about that, and we incorporate as much as we humanly can.
Yeah, I was going to ask about how whether it has been like especially challenging in recent years, just because it feels like baseball itself has undergone a lot of transformations in how teams are being built, the strategies that players are taking, the way that the league has introduced different new rule tweaks and everything. And I know you guys have all the different elements that are applicable to the game
Yep.
in the game itself. So is that something that it's like exciting? It's a source of kind of keeping a game fresh to be able to say like, well, we've now like I know that like the AI of opposing general managers, depending on what era you're in, will kind of value things differently. They'll value sabermetrics more in the current era. But if you go back, which I actually like to do, I like to go back to like pre-sabermetrics, and I still know about sabermetrics, so I'm using WAR and everything, but they're still using batting average to kind of make
Right.
decisions.
Right.
But things like that, or things like different roster sizes or tactics, is that a challenge, or is that sort of like exciting because it just adds a new wrinkle that people can kind of play around with? And do you learn anything from seeing like tracking how players do things? Is that maybe something that like actual GM should be looking at how people play out of the park and be like, huh, maybe this the players are starting to do this. Maybe we should try this in real life.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the above, right? It's exciting because we'd love to be able to add new stuff to the game that's in real baseball. We'd love it, right? I love the fact that now it's all DH in both leagues,
Yeah.
right? Like that's cool. Now,
I
granted,
used
for
to do that anyway, by the way. I was ahead on the curve on that because I didn't want to have to deal with the pinch hitting for the pitchers.
right. I was just going to say we've had that option for years. So you could say
Yeah.
we were ahead of it,
Oh, for
there. We had the
sure.
option. You could, and we still do, right? You could turn off DHs if you want, or you can have them just in the AL and not,
Yeah, you could go back to like 1940 and have
Yep.
Ted Williams DH or something.
Yep, you can absolutely do that. All right. So we love when new things are added. But it's a challenge because it depends on when you find out. Our game releases in early to mid March, and so there are things that if you don't find out that they're happening until the middle of February, you might not be able to get them in on time for
Yeah,
the season.
where are the Rays playing? Where's the where are the A's playing next year in the game?
Right. So
Or
the
2 years from
the,
now?
the A's are playing at the Sutter Park, I believe is the name of it. We were given very clear guidelines on that, which we followed. And same thing with the Rays. The Rays are playing at the Trop in our game, which is the guidelines that we were given, and that's all well and good, and that's just part of making a licensed release is in some cases you're given the guidelines by the leagues and the players association, and sometimes you're sort of able to take liberties, relatively speaking, with what you do and how you do it. But also, and I know it sounds trite when I say it, but like it has to be fun. So like a great example is the pitch clock, right? The pitch clock has transformed Major League Baseball and I think made it incredibly much more watchable. And look, you and I are baseball guys. I was watching it no matter what, right? But
Right.
like, there's no denying that the pace of the game is really good these days. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It just moves quicker. It's better. It's easier to watch as a fan. It's easier to watch. It's just a better experience. But there's no fun way to implement a pitch clock in out of the park baseball. It's just it doesn't quite work because of the nature of our game. So we haven't added the pitch clock. It just there's not a utility that makes it fun. We've been debating like, well, do we cull the records and see which guys had the most pitch clock violations and add a little something
I was going to
to
ask
that?
about that, whether there was like a random, if people were prone to having violations, would they show up as like potentially? I haven't encountered that, but I was assuming that it was rare enough that it might not be possible to just play it and not see it.
So it's possible, but it's one of those things that we just sort of at the end of the day said this isn't really fun. And I liken it to conversations and arguments that I've had for 20 years with some of my friends. I hate holding penalties in Madden.
Oh,
I
I was
hate
just
them.
thinking of
I
holding in
hate
Madden
them.
because you've got no control over
No
that.
control. No control. Now,
Yeah.
Madden fans that support holding penalties can absolutely make the case that it's more realistic. Holding penalties happen, they kill drives, right? I get it. I completely get it. But when I'm down by 3 points in the fourth quarter and it's 3rd and 3 and I get a 4 yard gain and that's called back by a holding penalty against my left guard, not fun, right?
We've all been there.
So we're right now with the pitch clock because our game isn't a real time game, right? We just didn't feel like the utility worked. But ghost runners, and
Yeah.
extra innings in the regular season, they got in, immediately.
Ban
You
on
know,
the shift because I used to call shifts
absolutely.
all the time.
Yes.
Every single pitch would have a
Yes.
shift on, and now you can
Right.
only shade them a
That's
little
right.
bit.
Or, the guy's got to throw to three guys, right? The pitcher's got to throw to three
Yep.
batters, right? Like that's in the game. And not because it's fun, but because it's an authentic part of the game that also does absolutely impact decisions that you're going to make, right? But like a lot of things, we have the option to turn those rules off if you want to. Again, our rule set lets you basically turn anything on or off that you want to. So it just comes down to it's very exciting. Sometimes the things that change aren't don't get into the game right away because we didn't find out about them in enough time or things like that. But at the end of the day, as baseball evolves, we evolve, and I think that we take the best of baseball has, and we sort of crystallize it in our game in a way that, really there's nothing else quite like it out there in the world.
Yeah, totally. And I think you mentioned earlier that understandable kind of hesitation to make predictions about the future. But in conjunction with what you were saying about the audience getting younger, I was wondering if you see any like trends about where you think not just out of the park, but sort of like sports simulation games are going as a genre in general. Are we going to see more of the emphasis on the sort of like time management of the player and trying to kind of deliver them more bang for the buck of investing their time in the game? Are there any like innovative things that you've seen other games do? Like you mentioned, kind of drawing inspiration from the show to get to the pennant mode. Are there things that you've seen that you're like, this is going to be the future of sports simulations? And yeah, just what stands out to you in that regard?
Well, the thing that strikes me most about sports games now and the audience is that the way that a lot of sports games are played now is very different than they were 20 years ago. Like the addition of your Ultimate Teams and Diamond Dynasty have really changed the language of sports games in a way that is unique to sports games. And I don't even mean the revenues associated with that.
Although
Um,
that has been a factor as
that's
well, I
absolutely. I
think.
mean, and look, it's absolutely a factor.
Yeah.
And look, I know that I'm on the sports game development side, but even before I joined it, like most people don't know this, and there's no reason for them to know it. But to make a licensed sports game is an extraordinarily high cost structure. Um, and it's not a complaint, it's just a fact, right? Like if you're going to be licensing a league and the players, and you're going to then be distributing that on platforms like Steam or Apple or Google, right? All of those are costs that you have to absorb before you start collecting a single dollar of your own revenue. So, because sports games are so expensive to produce, um, innovation is incremental, as opposed to immediate. And I've always been okay with that, right? Like always, because if you look at the difference between Madden 22 and 23, or Madden 24 and 25, or you look at the difference between, the show 24 and the show 25, or the show 20 and 22, you're not going to see a lot of differences. But if you put the show 19 and the show 25, you're going to go, whoa, okay, there's a lot, right? If you do Madden 19 and Madden 25, you're going to go, if you take out of the park 18 and out of the park 25, and you put them side by side, you are going to be like, wow, this is not, like this is a completely different thing, because sports games are so expensive to make, and the development cycles are short, and the revenue periods are even shorter. you know those kinds of innovations are going to take place in small steps over time, um, as opposed to, like, when you see, certain studios are able to spend 5 years between games, right? Or like look at
Or
Rockstar and
longer.
Grand Theft Auto, GTA 5 versus GTA 6, right? It still blows my mind that Vice City came out a year after GTA 3,
That's
and then San Andreas came
crazy.
out a year after Vice City, right?
Yeah. And now, yeah, it's been more than 10 years since we've
Right.
gotten one.
So in sports games, because the way that we all make our games, which is annual releases, which is how it
It
should
just
be,
has to
because
be, yeah.
sports are an annual thing, right? Like
Right.
it's an annual thing, that's what fans want and expect. I think you're going to continue to see the further evolution of the single player experience, right? Like in NBA 2K, with the park, right? And in MLB, they have Road to the Show. Like you're going to continue to see an expansion of those single player modes, because we all know that there's a healthy number of people who only want to have their own experience and not be impacted by anybody else. And that's cool. And we respect that. And then you've got people who really want to be competitive, and they want to be the best, and they want to win a World Series, and they want to win an MVP, and they want to do it against other people, and they want to have bragging rights. One of the things that we do in our perfect team mode, which is again an online competitive mode, a new season starts every Monday, and we play a 162 game season that ends on Sunday. And it's like European football, right? There's different tiers from like the bronze league all the way up to what's called the perfect league, which is the highest level of cards that we have, perfect cards, right? And if you win the perfect league, we literally send you a physical trophy. I got one here. Hold on one
Wow,
second.
that's amazing.
Sorry,
Yeah, I want to see this. We got to show this to the
sorry about that.
viewers.
But sorry about the camera.
No, it's good.
But we send you a physical trophy. Sorry, I got to adjust my camera here. Makes for great radio. Um,
No, it's all good.
we send you a physical trophy, right? If you
Wow.
win the perfect league. So everybody who wins the top tier championship gets that. And we have other competitions where you can win a, like a championship belt. Obviously, you get a lot of in-game rewards and things like that. So there's all kinds of people that want all kinds of experience. So innovation is going to be incremental. You're not going to notice a lot year to year that's going to make you go, wow, this is incredible. But what you will see every single year is a continued evolution and expansion because all of us are trying to do the same thing, which is how can we give our fans more than they could possibly experience and feel good about that? We want our fans to get such value for their $50 that they never question, was that $50 worth it? It's like, man, that $50, I got my money's worth after like, just a week, much less 6 months later, 9 months. And that's one of the things we see with Out of the Park baseball. We have more people playing Out of the Park 25 at the end of February than we did when it launched in March, right? We keep a lot of our fans around not only during the baseball season, but also during the off season because we're constantly adding new stuff. We're adding new cards to Perfect Team and new competitions and new tournaments. And we have live start. So if it's August 5th and you want to just start a season where you are, where your team is
I
on
love
August 5th,
Live Start, by
yeah,
the
they're
way.
amazing, right?
Yeah.
And you can go back and you can say, well, I want to start on May 10th or whatever, right? Or like we just want to give them so much value that they will never question their desire to not only purchase the game or never question why their decision to purchase the game, but also make them want to get the next game as soon as it comes out, right? And value is very different to different people. And obviously, $50 is a lot of money no matter what. But we just want people to feel great about it. And the more that we can add to the game that's authentic and that works and that gives people a chance to have fun, that's what we're all about.
Well, and that's why I'm excited for the game coming out and why I wanted to talk to you. So, just one last thing as we kind of come up on time, I wanted to ask if you had any favorite story or moment or feature or just anything that in your time working on the game, what's like your favorite
Wow.
moment?
So many, so many, a couple of them. So one time we do a lot of live streaming. We're constantly streaming our game and talking
And
to
that's on
fans and
Twitch
stuff.
and that's on YouTube, right?
That's on Twitch, and yeah, we do live streaming on Twitch, and we archive all that stuff on YouTube. So one time after the World Series in 2020, this was November or December, we had Brett Phillips come on our live stream, and we set up a couple of teams that he had played on for him to manage the game live, right? So like it's him and I, and we're talking, and I'm saying, all right, what do you want to do? And he sets his lineups, and he's like, all right, shift the defense to the left here, and we go through a whole game. And it comes up, and it's the bottom of the ninth inning, and the team that he's managing is down by a run or two, and he hits a walk-off home run to win the game. And he gets up and he runs around in his room and he does
He
the
does
whole,
the thing.
does the thing that Brett Phillips does, and it was just one of those great moments. Another time that was amazing was I was a dude we Kevin Kennedy, the former manager of the Red Sox, gotten to know him a little bit. We spent a lot of time playing Out of the Park on stream, and we went back and we replayed what we did. What a lot of people don't realize, Kevin Kennedy was a great manager, not a good manager, a great manager. And if Kevin Kennedy's teams had played under the same playoff structure as now, every single team he ever managed would have been in the playoffs. So we went back and we took the first team that he managed, and we set up a playoff of his team against another team, and we simulated, or excuse me, he live managed the game, and he wound up winning the World Series with his first team, and it was just a great moment. There are dozens of those, but those are just a couple. Like being able to talk with people who are real baseball managers and real baseball players, and experiencing out of the park baseball with them, and with seeing them have a good time and enjoy it. Just, it sort of lets you pat yourself on the back and be like, yeah, we have something really good with this thing. We really do.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's always kind of stood out to me, that speaks and vouches for the authenticity is so many players love out of the park, so many
Hmm.
managers and just people connected with the game that it's
Yes.
almost sort of undeniable. Like once you get into it, you get it. But even if you were coming to it from the outside, just to see the endorsements of like there are if the players are playing this and they find it to be authentic enough for them and they live this every day, then you guys are doing something right.
Yeah, some guys use it as a tool. I've talked to dozens of scouts and some managers and GMs over the years. A couple of them are public. Like I've worked with I worked with Gabe Kapler, for
Mhm.
example. And had a lot of fun with him. And we work with a bunch of different guys, and some of them use it as like a tool during the pandemic. Several teams were using it to just get reps of, okay, it's the seventh inning, first and third, two outs. Here's the situation. Like, what do we do here, right? Um, but yeah, it's gratifying and it's fun. And some guys just use it just to goof around. They don't get enough baseball in their day job, and they want to go and they want to simulate tomorrow's game. Oh, who's pitching? Oh, okay, this guy's pitching. Let me see how we're going to do against them. So yeah, it's really cool because I will get messages all year long from various players and people affiliated with the clubs, talking about, oh yeah, we just signed this kid from the Dominican Republic that we've been scouting for 3 years, and now we got him. Thanks, for having him in the game. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but you're welcome.
That's amazing. Well, Rich, I wanted to just say thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk with me and just kind of go on this wide-ranging conversation about baseball and out of the park and just sports management simulations. So, why don't we close by having you tell everybody where they can find Out of the Park, when it comes out, all the different things that people can do to get this game in the next very, very soon, actually.
Yep. So Out of the Park Baseball 26, the 26th edition of the game officially is live worldwide on March 14th. So that's this Friday as we're talking. If you're a PC gamer player and you're on Steam, it's on Steam. And if you don't know what that means you're not a Steam person, and that's okay. You can get it directly from us as well. You just go to ootpdevelopments.com. It's right there on the front page. If that's too much, you just Google Out of the Park Baseball, and if the algorithm is working, it'll serve it right up at the top of your page. But it's a PC game, so if you got a computer, if you got a laptop, and you want to just sort of say, all right, what's my team going to look like this year, or what's that trade, if I could trade my third baseman, I would. Or if I want to, I want to relive 1985. I want my Mets to beat those stinking Cardinals in 85, once and for all. Like, if you just got an itch to do a little something in the world of baseball, Out of the Park Baseball can scratch it. So check out Out of the Park Baseball 26. It is available worldwide on Friday, March 14th, and you even get 10% off for the first week that it's out.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I can't wait to play it. And yeah, thanks again for taking the time. And we'll see everybody in the future on Neil's Substack for hopefully more of these little pop-up video podcast type things. Bye.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you, everybody.